Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today to the Majlis, which will be a very unusual one. And I won't chat it. It is one of our brilliant PhD student who organized it with me, Ismail al-Behbehani, and it was his idea to invite Dalal. And he is going to lead the discussion, which I think will be fascinating, as you saw the advert. Of course, this is something which I love, Arabic tales with animals included. But while I research the old ones, they very explicitly research. Their research and creativity has very modern contemporary implications in reviving the genre and in making these in keeping these animals alive in the wilderness and in our minds. So that's a very interesting project of both of you. So yeah, we are looking for a treat here. And yeah, and also just to this Majlis will also show how blessed we are with our students. We have PhD students like Ismail, and this is really a great game. Ismail, please.
Hello, everybody. Good evening here in Kuwait. It's evening. I think it's afternoon where you most of you are. So I was glad when Stephen asked me to if I had a name for the Monday Majlis, especially a female name. So it worked out for Dr. Dalal Baroud, who I'll just call Dalal for the rest of the, without her permission, for the rest of the talk. So Dalal is, she's a poet and a published author. She's an assistant professor in Arabic language and literature in the Department of College of Basic Education, PAAET, in Kuwait. She has a master's and a PhD in comparative literature from SOAS. I was fascinated because a few weeks ago, I saw her on a social media post. She had an interview with a radio channel in Kuwait. I think it was Marina, and she was speaking about her book, Shādin wa-Siḥr al-Farāsha, which can be translated as the gazelle and the charm of the butterfly. I'm sure I got the gazelle wrong. I think it's
Shādin. It's Shādin.
Shādin. Okay, yeah. So the name Shādin wa-Siḥr al-Farāsha. Shādin and the charm of the butterfly. Shādin is Arabic for baby gazelle. So I was fascinated because she revived two things in my mind in this book. She revived animals that have long been forgotten, which used to roam, and some of them still roam the Arabian Peninsula. And also the genre, the poetic theater literature, which is, I know in the Arabic world, it hasn't really got going in the 20th and 21st century. So I was surprised that she took these two elements and tried to rejuvenate them, if you'd like. I was also interested because I'm interested in animals, and I've written a book on animals in pre-Islamic Jahili poetry, which we will discuss later. So without further ado, I'd like to start this discussion with you, Dalal. So the first question I think everybody is interested in is speak to us about your journey, about your personal journey from Kuwait to SOAS and then this book.
Yeah, sure. First of all, good evening, everybody. I'm so honored to be hosted by Exeter University. Actually, Exeter was one of my choices in terms of continuing my postgraduate studies. However, I chose SOAS at the end, but one of my examiners, my PhD examiners in the Viva was from Exeter, and I am very proud, his name is Dr. Ian, and he gave me a lot of positive feedback back then in the Viva. So I have an emotional relationship, let's say, with Exeter University. And also I have a lot of friends who are PhD graduates from Exeter University who are now colleagues in my department and also in the University of Kuwait. So there is a good relationship between us and University of Exeter. And I'm very honored, seriously, and I thank Dr. Sivan and you, Ismail, for your trust in me. So I hope we can deliver an interesting talk today. First of all, I'm a very aggressive when it comes to talk about my PhD journey. And the reason why I always say that PhD students always romanticize the PhD journey, and they always romanticize the relationships with books and the library, and they talk about it as a fairy tale and as a vacation in order to get their PhD degree. However, from my personal opinion and my personal experience, it was a very tough journey, a very difficult one from the beginning. Starting from choosing and opting my major, I majored in comparative literature. And in Kuwait here, we are privileged to have certain educational institution that offers to fully sponsored the postgraduate students. And also when they are back, they will be assistant professors in college. So I was privileged to be to apply for this position. However, when the College of Basic Education, they offered the majors that they want students to major in. There was the linguistics, which is not my major in bachelor, and there was the Abbasid poetry, and I know it will be a very popular major to choose. And it will be crowded, and also the competition will be a lot when it comes to the Abbasid poetry. And there comes the lonely major, which is comparative literature, which no one applied for except me. So I was there giving the personal interview, and also there was an exam in order to apply for this. So what really captured me and really made me apply for this. I know how hard can be how hard comparative literature can be. However, for me, it provided me with freedom, to be honest, because there wasn't any historical era that I am obliged and have to go and study about. So I'm not, limited by the historical era. Moreover, it was a bit expand, so I can choose whatever literary genre in order to study. Therefore, for me, it was very tempting to go for this major, although it is difficult and students mostly avoid that kind of major. When I first decided to go to the UK, I decided to go to the UK because my sister was doing her master's in microbiology I forgot, Bristol. Yeah, in Bristol. So I was familiar with the English educational system and institutes and their requirements. Therefore, it was easier for me to apply for SOAS. The first obstacle is the IELTS exam. Although I was very good at English, but any international student can relate to the IELTS, what can we say, sufferness. It was really something hard to get, because it's not really an exam that you know, measures your fluency or how good you are in English. Moreover, it's more of a technical exam, and you have to, you know, grab the essence of its techniques. So and the requirements for SAWAS was not only to have 7 in the overall you know, total, but also 7 in each band. So this was a bit you know, hard. However, I passed the IELTS. It wasn't really a big problem for me. However, I chose, and the College of Basic Education gives you that option if you want to study academic English before getting into the masters. And I took that road because although I am good in English and also I had scored the IELTS, however, I have no background when it comes to the British structure and the UK structure of writing an academic essay. So I took my academic language course at UCL, which wasn't really also an easy journey. UCL, one of the most, you know, difficult universities in the UK. So their course and their program was really tough. However, I'm so thankful and grateful for that course because it really made me you know, be a professional when it comes to writing an academic essay, whatever structure it will follow. The next year, I joined the master's program at SAWAS in comparative literature. I chose SAWAS because they have both majors in the Middle East, Middle Eastern studies, the comparative literature and the Middle Eastern literature. And this was a bit rare to find among the UK universities. So SAWAS offered that, and their major sheet was really compatible with the sponsor's requirement. I joined the first program, and my first week in the masters was, where am I? Like, where is it and how it is? And the readings that we are given in 1 week is huge and amazing. And at the first week, I was like feeling lost. I feel that everybody was ahead of me. I was questioning myself. Am I doing this? Is this bigger than what I thought? Am I going to be there? And, you know, I have friends from Kuwait who were in the in this experience before me, and they told me, like, we questioned ourselves first. It's huge when it comes to reading, but you'll get the hang of it. So I believed in myself, and I started to follow up. When it comes to the first terms of essays, I wrote my essays, and like my ambition was just to pass through the essays. However, thank God I got some distinctions in my first essays, which gave me a push for doing the second term of essays and passing, you know, the final exams. Finally, I chose to make my thesis about al-Jawari, the Shi'r al-Jawari, the slaves poetry, the female slaves in poetry in the Abbasid era, because I thought there is so much into it, especially when it comes to erotics. And, you know, in our Middle Eastern culture, these are most of what we call it taboo kind of issues. And it was never really discussed. And also female slaves were dealt with as, you know, an entertainment devices more than human being. And in a previous time, I read a collection translated by Dr. Abdullah Bushmays from Jordan about the poetry of the Landai, which is actually a folklore genre of women in Afghanistan. And it's used to be like small verses, short verses of poetry, mostly anonymously written, because, you know, writing poetry in Afghanistan would, you know, risk the life of the female. And ironically, those short verses were very sexual. And also it uses sexuality to downgrade the man. Because usually women from Afghanistan, young women, are forced to marry men who are 60 years and above. Mostly this young woman would be in love with a young man who has to go to the war, and the family is forced to get their daughters married to an older man in order to get more money. So they used the poetry of Landai as a defense mechanism in order to have control on themselves and have the sense of authority when it comes to their bodies, and write a sexual downgrading poem to use it as a tool to defend themselves. And being a woman in Afghanistan writing this kind of poetry is really reckless. And more women from that culture, when they knew about them, they killed them. Therefore, it was a rebellious move from the women. And I thought there are a lot of relations when it comes to that with al-Jawari poetry, especially because in the Abbasid era, there are two types of poets, female poets in that era. There is al-Hara'ir, the free women, and there were al-Jawari, the slave women. And ironically, al-Hara'ir, who are the free women, or they come from a noble family, they were forbidden to write erotics in their poetry. Or let's say most of the poems can be very, very like porn poetry. However, al-Jawari, who are enslaved and who are captured and they lose their freedom, were free to express their sexualities, their body needs, their sexual experiences with their masters through poetry. And also they used sexual sarcasm against other poets. For example, we have Jariya, her name is Anan, and she has a poem where she is downgrading the sexuality of Abu Nuwas, who was a very famous poet in Abbasid era. And she talked about his organs and how they are not manly and not masculine. And therefore, I found both pieces from the Landai and those pieces from al-Jawari very rebellious. My master thesis concluded that actually I asked in this thesis, who is really free? What is freedom? What is sexual freedom? Can we really consider al-Jawari enslaved where they had the full the complete freedom to talk about their sexualities, while on the other hand, the free women poets cannot speak about that? And also, apparently with my research, it appears that sexuality and talking about that topic, especially in literature, is highly related to the economic status and how sexuality is related to the mass culture. However, elites will not study that kind of poetry and not write that kind of poetry. So there is a lot of classism culturally, economically as well, when it comes to that sexual poetry. In my PhD, I didn't continue this topic because it was poor in its references. Sadly, there weren't a lot of documentation when it comes to the poetry of al-Jawari. Then I turned into another page, which is totally different than what I did in the master's, which is Sufism. And my PhD title was Dialogue with the Divine. And I searched about the direct dialogue. My research was about the direct dialogue of Sufi poets with the divine. There are different genres. I studied al-Suhrawardi, al-Nifari, and Salah Abdul Sabur through his poetic play Ma'sat al-Hallaj. And also Ma'sat is misery, if we can translate that. And here with my PhD started my ma'sat as well, my misery. I wanted, you know, when you are very ambitious and young, you choose something, you want to do an original topic, you want to do something never been done, you want to put your own voice, but I didn't see that the cost of that will be very, very, you know, expensive. In my first year of the PhD, I started to have physical diseases, and I was diagnosed with my IBS at my first year because I started my PhD directly after my master's. I didn't even take a break. Then I had this issue of, you know, continuing my studies or not, and also getting into, you know, committees, whether I should submit my literature review with my upgraded chapter, or we have a delay in that. So I lived the fear of not passing the first year, the MPhil, and I had to deliver everything together. After just like surviving from the first year, I faced another problem, that the topic I chose, which is dialogue, has never been studied by anyone in the world, especially when it comes to the Sufi dialogue. Therefore, my mission was a bit harder. Actually, I was creating a source instead of using sources. So I always advise my colleagues, my friends, whenever they want to do their PhD, don't be a smart one, don't go for an original, just go for a topic that you can add, because that costed me a lot. I suffered with my university about making them understand how this topic is really original and really poor when it comes to resources. I got into many committees where I have to convince them why I didn't produce 30,000 words by the third year. I had to go through a lot of committees. They put me with the disabilities department in order to have an excuse, you know, because I have a chronic diseases. I had panic attacks when I don't find anything to write about. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder by the year of 2017, and I took anxiety pills in order just to calm down and just go with the, you know, with the studies. My supervisor was really supportive. I was very grateful for him. However, he surprised me that in 2018, he is going to retire and he is going to hand me over to the second supervisor. You know, after dealing with 4 years with my supervisor, we have a relationship, and every PhD, you know, student knows that this would be a nightmare. I transferred with another supervisor, and we started ahead again. However, I faced a lot of medical issues in 2019, which pushed my deadline in 2020. And everyone knows what happened in 2020. Corona happened. So after all of these difficulties, I started with the Corona and COVID. I faced delayed in my deadlines until I finally had the chance to have the Viva in 2022, and then I got graduated and attended my graduation. So I started my PhD journey in 2014, and I finished in 2022. So anyone, I'm very assured to deliver this kind of journey. I don't want to make people feel, you know, disappointed or like not, you know, encouraged. However, we have to give the reality of it. And as my supervisor always told me, I know PhD is a very lonely journey, and he was truly right.
Okay, Dalal, so I didn't know any of this, so this was very fascinating. Maybe you can write a tragedy about your PhD journey after.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But it's al-Farāj بعد al-Shidda, no? So it's been a very
Yeah,
happy and Dalal,
a happy
I'm
ending.
going to make this majlis obligatory for all my MA students. It's really fantastic what you told to us. It's so educative for students, but I think also for us on the other side.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So this was your academic journey.
Yes.
Now I'm interested in what got you to write this book. So I now learned that because through our preparation for this talk that it's a nearly 8-year process. So what was so can you speak us through it, and especially the motivations both for writing on this genre of poetic theater, مسرح الشعري, and also why the animals. So take us through this epic journey.
Sure. So the spark of this work started in 2014 when I was about to finish my master's and begin with my PhD. Actually, the start of it was a suggestion and a collaboration with one of my friends who had a project to create an educational platform for teenagers, for young adults. And one of the things he wanted to do was a musical. He came with the idea of tigers and lions, and how we can start from there. Before that, I came to the UK first time for me to come to the UK was in 2010 when my sister was studying there. And through visiting London, I had the privilege to attend musicals in the West End, and also I attended Lion King. And when I first saw the musical and how the music is live, the customs, the whole experience of the musical theater, I was fascinated. I was like a kid in a candy store. I was wowed and amazed the whole show for 3 hours. And I thought in myself, like, I wish I can do this one day. I wish I can pull off something like that. And the idea stayed back then from 2010 there, but I didn't have the idea. I had an idea, but I waited because that idea was very deep and I needed to, improve my tools. However, when the opportunity came with this friend, I thought, why not? But I disagreed with him when it comes to the creatures, lions and tigers. I said to him, like, there's Lion King. No one can touch lions again after Lion Kings. And also tigers are very, familiar. Why not like using creatures from our environment, from our culture, especially if you want to present this in Arabic. And here we came with like the idea of searching for creatures. I started the research and found out that no one actually did present the Arabian oryx as a main character. Although our poetry, our Arabic poetry, since the pre-Islamic poetry, used this creature to glorify beauty, tenderness, taste, all beauty in general. So why not? Why nobody used that creature? And also, I was very careful in order to choose that creature because I searched all the animation movies or any stories that presented animals, and I made sure that really the work would be the first book to present the Arabian oryx, especially when it's a very endangered and vulnerable creature. As you said in your book, it is facing the the danger of extinction. And however, it made me really sad that nobody else, like nobody before, thought about presenting it as a main character. And here my journey of research started, and I started looking for oryxes, their names in the dictionaries, what main books that discussed this genre and this type of topic. I read Al-Hayawan for Al-Jahaz. I read so many books that go research and classify the animals in the Arabic environment, especially because I want to write something from my culture and my environment to young adults from my culture and my environment. And unfortunately, now when you see the young generation.
Sorry, Dalal.
Yes.
Sorry, Dalal. Can you explain the main sources and how how did you find each of
Sure.
these sources for
Sure.
for learning about the animal, and what is the Arabic precise term for the different species?
Yes.
Which is
Yes.
I know it's a very
yeah, it was an
مفهوم
interesting
يعني.
discussion. First of all, we had a misconception of what is maha and what is a dhabi. Okay,
Me and her.
that's the conversation we had. Because I come from Arabic literature background, I started with dictionaries, and I started with Ibn Mandur, Lisan al-Arab, which is the Bible for anyone who wants to go through the meanings. And what is interesting was that the definition of al-maha is al-baqar al-wahshi, which is addex. And many people, as I faced, they misconcept al-maha with al-dhabi. Al-maha is an addex, which is a creature that lived in the Arabian desert, and poets glorify the beauty of their eyes, and therefore they used it as an analogy for their loved ones in their poetry. The male of the addex, we call it an ox, which is similarly to the what we know about cows. Therefore, it is another creature. However, the Arabian oryx, al-dhabi, is the one on the book cover of mine, and the one also on your book as well. After so many research, I found out that al-dhabi, what goes under the genre of al-dhabi, Arabic names that Arabs used to name their daughters after them, and also how they used it as a semiotic signification for their beloved. So we know the name Khawla and the name Rasha. For example, in Al-Hallaj poetry, Ya Nasim al-Rih, Quli li-Rasha, and it is originally al-Rasha with Hamza, okay? There is Shādin, and there is Afra, and there is Reem. Therefore, all these names lexically are classified under al-dhabi, not under the name of al-maha. Therefore, we need to differentiate between that. So I started with Lisan al-Arab. Then I went to Al-Hayawan by Al-Jahaz to go through this information. Also, there is a really great book called Al-Hayawan fil Adab al-Arabi, which is consisted of 4 volumes. It goes through each animal that mentioned in Arabic poetry, gives a full description about their creatures. There are also drawings about those creatures. There are also a classification of their types and kinds. Also, there are also a column about the names that you can use, what vocabulary you have to use when it comes to the little ones, the teenagers, and the adult ones. So actually, Shādin in Lisan al-Arab is الظبي الذي استغنى عن والديه, the oryx that is strong enough to let go of their dependence on their parents. So actually a teenager oryx. So that's why I chose the name Shādin, because that's the age
Young
I am
adults.
targeting. Yeah, young adults. Also, there is also vocabulary that I discovered, which is really beautiful, that even the degree of a color would differentiate between an oryx and another. You will find that there is Adami, the name of Shādin's father, and Adami is a dhabi that tends to be tan. So and you know, udum in Arabic means the sand.
Okay.
So Adami, they call it because they tend in their colors to be more of a like in the sand shades. That's why they call it Adami, which is something I really discovered through my research. Moreover, you will see the prince name is Aqid al-Jid, and it is ism murakkab, like yours, Sayed Ismail. It's Aqid al-Jid. Aqid al-Jid is actually an attribute of the beauty of the oryx, because whenever the oryx turn their necks, so aqid, to turn, okay, al-jid is the neck, so aqid al-jid is a beautiful attribute to the oryxes, and that's why I chose this name to be the prince's name. So each name in this play was highly deeply researched, and that's how I also land on. One of the main references also that I used is the poetry of Tardiyat.
Okay.
The poetry of Tardiyat, which is a genre of poetry that mainly focus on the hunting trips. There are a lot of poets are famous of this genre, mostly Abu Nuwas. In the art of Tardiyat, there's something really beautiful, because Abu Nuwas especially will give you a detailed description of that creature, especially when it comes to the physical features of that creature. Also, there are some words that I learned that it is related to a creature more specifically or particularly to the cheetahs more than the oryxes, for example. So I learned the word nimr, and nimr actually dots. So how they, dots, how they use it, what do they call the clouds, how do they use it also. You know, Arabic is really rich and fascinating, and when you go to Fiqh al-Lugha للثعالبي, he classifies jumping. So when al-dhabi jumps, it's nazaba, but when a cheetah jumps, it's wathaba. So it's different. It's the same meaning, however, it's different. So it's fascinating. So I had to go through all the lexical books and the literary books that talks about animals, the vocabulary of the animals, how to describe the actions, how to differentiate between female and a male. So it was a deep research, to be honest.
So Dalal, when I was reading your work, I realized that a lot of the words are used, especially when they relate to specific kinds of animals. They came to you through research, because some of these words are not associated with humans. They're associated with specific animals, like the word nahim, for example, which is it also used for a lion, or is it only the roar of the cheetah?
Nahib is the voice of the cheetah, because the ear is the voice or the roar of lion. So there's a differentiation between the roar of a lion and the roar of a cheetah. So, which is very, very, very precise, you know.
Yes, it's very cute.
Also, when we come to the name of the groups, for example, a group of oryxes are sirb, not qati', not herd. Okay, when it comes to the cheetahs, a group of cheetahs are arjala. So it's very specific and precise.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We might come to that soon. You told me that for the first few years, you didn't write any poetry. It was just the structuring of the story.
Yes.
And at a later stage, you started to write the poetry. Talk us through that and about the meters and the qafiyah, or the rhyming ending. you chose for the work. And I think the audience should put in their mind that she's writing a play. So music and the different characters are in her mind, unlike when someone writes a novel. So
Yeah.
I think they should know that.
Well, at first, I write.
Dalal, before you say that, I just want to mention that as a general observation, that you say creative people are hopeless. You gave the advice of not to be over creative, not to look for something over original, and then you started to say, and I wanted to do something which no one did. So yeah, this is just like this.
Yeah, I mean,
the
poet always wins. The poet always wins, you know. Well, when it comes to the work and how I did develop that, first, when I reached to a structure for the story after the research, I know I'm a poet myself. I've been writing poetry professionally since the year 2008. However, you know, poetry is very personal. So related to your character, and now I have to write a work that is related to a lot of characters, different voices, which is basically a story, which I didn't do before. Therefore, I went to City University in London, which is located in Holborn, very close to SOAS, and they offered playwright classes. And I participated in that in order to learn the techniques of plays. And you know, where is the better place from the UK to learn theater? It is the country of Shakespeare. So you have to learn from the professionals, you know. I participated in that. I really get a lot of knowledge. One of the things that was really beautiful is the application of what you learn. So we were obliged to write a scene where we, you know, apply what we learned, and we have feedback from the classmates and also our instructor. And imagine that I had to translate what I write from Arabic into English lyrically. So I needed to, you know, transfer the vibe of poetry, at least when it comes to rhymes. So my classmates understand what I'm trying to do. And from the first scene I wrote, which was not the first opening scene I wrote the key moment scene, which is the seventh scene you read. That was the first scene I wrote. And when I read that among my classmates and my instructor, I had a really positive feedback, which encouraged me to continue. I tried to also participate in the second term. However, you know, PhD and the work, the academic work had all my time. So I postponed that project. So I wrote a scene or two. Then I left that project after finishing my PhD. I had a free time before getting back to work. So people expected me to publish my diwan, my poetry collection. However, I started to write poetry and there's no poetry coming out of me. So I thought, why not, you know, go to another project I had, which was this project. And this project is really meaningful to me because I have a sister and she has 4 kids, 2 daughters and 2 sons. And they are now, the youngest is 13 years old. And one of them, the second one, his name is Muhammad, once came to me and told me, like, Auntie, I want to ask you a question. Our grandfather, our ancestors were cowboys or pirates. And I laughed because, you know, what? You are a Bedouin, you are someone from the desert. What do we have to do with cowboys and pirates? They are not even relatable to us. Therefore, it really made me question myself. Okay, those are the young generations. And, you know, my nieces and nephews are in an international school where they study in English. So they are reading books in English. They are watching movies, stories from the West. And there are no stories from our culture that can, you know, reflect and represent and express their life now. and not even modernized. We always speak about Kalila wa Dumna, 1,000 nights, 1,000 Arabian nights. However, it's an ancient book. We need something new, and that motivated me more to publish this book first. So that's how I spent that year 2022 in writing the structure. And I was really blessed to find a friend of mine who is a filmmaker and writer, a director. When I presented my idea and the structure of it, he introduced me to the new world of storytelling, and I spent a whole year in writing the structure. Once I reached the satisfying part, I started to write the poetry. Actually, the poetry was the last part.
And Dalal, this genre in Arabic, can you tell us about its history?
Sure.
Like a brief, because what I know is that Ahmed Shawqi, Amir al-Shu'ara, tried to make it popular through his Majnoon Layla, which part of it was enacted, I think, Asmahan and Hamad Abdul Wahab. But really, throughout the 20th century, there aren't poetic plays in Arabic that I remember. Or so was it a genre that didn't become popular in the 20th century, and did that scare you?
Well, I like challenges. You can tell, huh? However, when theater started in the Middle East, it was started by actually a businessman called Maroun al-Naqash, and this was in the early 20th century. Because of the scholarships sent from the Middle East to Europe. Maroun al-Naqash was a Lebanese businessman who admired theater in Paris and France, and he wanted to transfer this experience into the Arabian world. That's why he first he presented a translated play by Molière, as far as I remember, and he called it al-Bakhil. And starting from that, theater started with poetry in first. And as you said and mentioned, that Ahmed Shawqi was the leading poetic playwright. He wrote a lot of plays with poetry, Majnoon Layla, and there are a lot of historical ones, also a comedy called As-Sudhuda. And actually, the society helped to make that art popular at that moment. Therefore, then afterwards, the theater turns from poetry to prose by Tawfiq al-Hakim. Tawfiq al-Hakim also is a leading play writer, and he was known for his plays, his topics, his ideas. Then came Salah Abd al-Sabur, who is a modern, we consider him as a modern poet in the 60s. After the revolution in Egypt, wrote a lot of plays. One of them was Ma'sat al-Hallaj, and I studied Ma'sat al-Hallaj in my PhD thesis. And unfortunately, afterwards, this tradition went really rare. Yeah, I cannot tell you, I cannot say that it's not there. It's there, but it's very rare and not popular as well. There are many reasons, because once time exceeds and develops, life develops, people tend to go shorter in focus and shorter in attention. The poetic plays needs time, especially the dialogue is poetic, and it needs a lot of interpretation and meditation. And also there was the novel that became very popular in the Arabic society, and actually took the crown from took the throne from the poetic plays, and therefore, yes.
Yeah, no, you can finish if you.
Yeah, and therefore the novel took the place. It became very popular. Therefore, writers tend to go to the novel and write the novel and literally just let go of the poetic place.
So the audience you target, you told me, is young, maybe even Western taught adults in the Arab world, I assume. But this language, do you think they will get it or they will understand it?
Okay.
Did you try to read parts of it to the generation you target? Or
Yes.
is it sometimes when I've done this, sometimes you do something because you think society should be that way, but you know, in real life, very little of your target audience will find reference to it. So I don't know. Can you tell me?
Yeah. Well, first of all, young adults is a class that is really ignored in Arabic literature nowadays in modern ways. Unlike what is happening in the West. For example, you will find big publishing houses like Penguin, for example, have their own department of young adults literature. There is Teen Penguin, and they have writers. Also, what stories nowadays which are very popular and made huge success are actually young adults stories, such as Harry Potter and Hunger Games, etc. So those stories of young adults were mainly written for young adults, and they are a genre that unfortunately ignored by our writers nowadays, because you will find in the Arabic literature now, it's either for kids who are younger than 10 years old or for adults above 18 years old. So there is a huge, class we are not writing for, especially in Arabic. And we have a lot of, complaints from people like our new generation is westernized. Our new generation is getting influenced by the Western media. And I always ask this question, okay, if you are complaining, what did you do for this class? And you cannot go, naive with this age, because this age is a Generation Z. They are born with the internet. They are 2 years old and they know how to grab a phone and how to access information and how to watch videos. So they are highly developed, high-tech generation. So you need to give them that factor of amazement, which is absolutely majored, and it's a profession for big production houses such as Disney, Universal Studios, DreamWorks, Pixar, and etc. And actually, it's a profession there. There is a lot of economy can be gathered and grown, can be grown with this kind of industry. However, we don't take this seriously in Arabic. We don't take this in a professional way in Arabic, and that's why teenagers in our society and culture, they tend to watch different stories from another languages and other cultures. Therefore, it was my decision to write for this generation, because afterwards this generation is our future, and we need to make them more relatable to their culture, and it's really make me sad when those when these kids are really have no idea that their culture is really rich and amazing, and the language, the poetry, and also it is also something good that we write them musicals, because they attend now musicals around the world. They can attend Lion King in theater, Wicked in theater. Also here in Kuwait, we have plays that are musicals, but in Kuwaiti dialect, but not in native Fusha. Before I wanted to do that, you will be surprised that my niece, she is 13, and she read through it, And she said, whenever I face a difficult word that I don't know, I just open Google and I search for the word. It is very easy.
That's fascinating.
This generation is really, you know, very smart, and they
Yeah,
will
I
ask
think if
Google
you
if they face any difficulty, you know.
I think if you, so this is my experience, if you're challenged with, I mean, it's a bit challenging, but
Yes.
it's the nice kind of challenge if you
Exactly.
are open to it. So my last question, if you'd like, so what are the initial responses, and would we ever see it in theater? Like, is
Yeah.
that a prospect? And yeah, and then you can.
Well, I got a positive feedback, like the feedback that I'm really proud of, that this work now is listed in the long list of Sheikh Zayed Book Award this year. They will announce the shortlist this week, so finger crossed that Shādin make it to the shortlist, and the final results will be announced by April. So I think like the biggest compliment I can get is getting nominated to the long list, because they chose 16 works out of 437 works. So Shādin made it through all of these works. So for me, this is a win by itself. Also, most of my friends and like people who told me their reactions toward this work, they all agreed on that it is really captivating. Even if I am an adult, I am captivated in that world. I want to finish it. The plot is not predictable at all. There are moments where we laughed, where we get scared, where we got worried about the main character. They said like it is, although it is poetry and it is our first experience to read poetry, however, it is very relatable, and we can sense the humor in it. And also there are a lot of deep meanings behind the story. It's more than animals. And to answer your question about why choosing animals, I think it's a very safe choice to escape censorship. So it's a really good. I think Abu Muqaffa didn't escape that, because Abu Ja'far al-Mansur was very highly intellectual and educated. However, I think it can pass this time. So Shādin can pass this time.
I think Esteban is very interested in this point. Yeah, so I think it's a fascinating book, and I would like, especially students in the West of Arabic literature, there is a lot of fusion, I think, between. You also spoke about Disney. There is also the spirit of Disney throughout. I mean, we have to admit.
Yeah, I cannot deny that Disney was a huge, influence on all of young people. Like when I was young, and the first thing I remember to see or to watch was Lion King, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and it influences you. It creates kind of your memory in it. And answering your question about the future of Shādin, I cannot tell the details. However, we are in the process of turning this book into a visual project. I cannot say what. However, we are in the process of turning it into a visual product, hopefully a universal one. So let's hope so.
Inshallah. So Dalal, now is the time where you can ask me.
Sure. I have so many questions for you. I have so many questions.
We have to make them
short. Well, I read your book. It's really fascinating, and I think it will be very beneficial for anyone who is doing their literary studies in the use of animals in poetry. And
can you introduce it? Because I think
of course. I think
if you don't have it, it's okay.
I left my copy inside.
No, I mean introduce it in talk.
Yeah, of course. Well, actually, the book called Wuḥūsh al-Qaṣīda by the one and only Sayed Ismail al-Behbehani, and it is, thank you, and it is actually a group of articles that discussed the animals mentioned in the pre-Islamic poetry. So Sayed classified each animal except horses and camels, right? And excluding birds.
Yeah.
Yes,
The
mammals
big
and the
mammals.
the big mammals. So he traced the traces of animals in pre-Islamic poetry and classified them in individual articles, mentioned poets and poems that mentioned that animal, and what can or how can we interpret the usage of that animal in that poem. It's fascinating, really, for me. I thought it is really well researched. I can use it later on for an academic study, maybe later on. And it's really, really important. And I know your goal was environmental in the first place. So you wrote this book to say, like, we need really to preserve these creatures. They are facing the danger of extinction. And I see it as a very noble message, to be honest. Therefore, I want to ask you about the motivation. What motivated you to write such a book?
So I have been throughout my life interested in conservation and in especially animals that are going extinct. This has been with me for a very long time. I'm also interested in Arabic poetry for a shorter period of time, but especially pre-Islamic Arabic poetry. I come from a different route than most people who study Arabic poetry, pre-Islamic poetry. I'm most interested from a historical perspective, because probably these are the only uttered words we have of the people who lived in Arabia at that time. Of course, we have some epigraphy, which is now becoming more common to read, but poetry takes you to the soul. And I always get annoyed when people say that there is not enough primary sources. I mean, if you get the soul of so many people living there, to me, it's richer, it's much richer than other more prosaic primary sources. Anyway, so I have these two passions, and I fused them in this work. I thought that shining light on these animals through poetry is like, it's a sort of activist scream, if you'd like, for the authorities and for the people to save the remaining populations left in the wild. I remember I was gonna apply to PhD, that was in 2017, and I couldn't for some reason that period. So I thought this will be my project. So I worked on it, and now I also am working on my PhD, and so things took a academically things took a good turn. Yeah. So
amazing. So I noticed something throughout your book, like you mentioned poetry, and you mentioned also the animals in poetry. So poetry transferred in the book from being a piece of literature into a tool of documentation of that wildlife there. It's actually watching National Geographic in words. So what is your input when it comes to using literature as a tool of documentation, and how can we relate this to modern poetry, especially that the modern human is living in cities flats, buildings, skyscrapers away from the wilderness. So what is your input about that?
Yes, I have to remind myself whilst researching and writing this work that these poets, in a lot of instances, not always, but in a lot of instances, they're talking or writing, sorry, not writing, they are uttering and producing poetry about elements which were very close to their lifestyle. They were living in what we would now call the wild. So they are writing about the scenery and images and animals which their lives sometimes dependent on, especially domesticated animals, which I don't touch in my poetry, but even the animals they speak about, they must have experienced a lot with at least the scenery of these animals. In other instances, of course, they go through themes of earlier poets. So when Labid speaks about the oryx, and so that doesn't necessarily mean that he saw the scene, but I'm pretty sure he'd seen probably similar scenes. So that's back then. You have what you correctly termed, it's more of a documentary reflection of the wild back then, something similar which you would see in TV today, but through a very human perspective. Whilst when you write, or others in the modern era use the wild in their work, it's talking about a land and a group of animals which we are alienated from. It's there, it's on TV. I can't go. I 2 weeks ago I visited the desert in Qatar, and I had this experience. So I can go, but it's not really part of parcel of our daily lives. So that's strikes me even now. This element of it, and I think for the modern audience, it's very difficult to produce something poetic which incorporates so much of the wild that way, I think.
Yeah. So do you think the modern poetry can deliver such message, such role in documenting wilderness?
Modern poetry, I'm not an avid reader actually of modern poetry. So I haven't realized this in modern poetry. You might have a better understanding if they do use animals from their environment. Usually when modern, so I've read Ahmed Shawqi. Ahmed Shawqi uses dhabi. He uses all the Arabian wildlife. Ahmed Shawqi was not from Arabia. Ahmed Shawqi was from Egypt. And he uses it because it is the themes and qawalib of the Arabic poetry. So he doesn't, that's the difference between Ahmed Shawqi and, for example, the poets of the Hudayl tribe. Hudayl was one of the most tribes associated with animal rearing and a wild state of existence. That's why a lot of scholars think they best describe Arabian animals. So modern poets can use animals, but they use it through the lenses of the ancient poets rather than through their own lenses. Meanwhile, when Ahmed Shawqi writes about the Nile, this is his own theme. It's not a theme in Arabic poetry. It is his reflection of something that he sees in front of him. So
I agree. And also, in addition to that, Ahmed Shawqi wrote the first actually to write poetry for kids, for children. And his children diwan was all about writing stories of animals through poems. So we all studied برز الثعلب يوما في شعار الواعظين, huh? And he used the fox in that. Also, he has an amazing poem about the crows, how a king of crows went to inhabit a palm tree. His minister advised him to catch some insects that was harming the palm tree. He didn't listen to him, and how it goes. So Ahmed Shawqi used animals to deliver a message for children through poetry, and it was amazing, to be honest, and nobody did it afterwards.
I think his son has also a poetic stories for kids about Noah's Ark, in which it's all about animals. I think,
really?
if I'm not mistaken, I think so. Hussein Ahmed Shawqi, I think his name was.
Oh, really? I would search for that, to be honest.
Yeah.
When it comes to the animals in your book and the examples you use from pre-Islamic poetry, I noticed that speaking about animals in the Qaṣīda, in the poem, is actually not active, if that term is right, which means like the poet is describing the animal, is giving us the image of animals and how do they move together. However, the animal in the poem doesn't have an individual voice. There's no conversation between the poet and the animal. There's no engagement. The animal is a semiotic tool that signifies or glorifies the poet character when it comes to bravery, when it comes to beauty. However, there's no voice for that creature. Why do you think is that? Why do you think this tendency is very, significant, that poetry?
Because I think the poets are not using the animals as characters in a fictionalized setting. They are using it for their you'd know better, as a function in their poetry, in a semiotic manner. I think in some cases the wolf speaks. There is this recurrent theme of the wolf asking for water, and the poet tries to show that he is so noble, even if his enemy is asking for water, he will give them. But the wolf is not taking it's not really fictional in a way that the poet is really interested in himself rather than the wolf. So it's not like giving the wolf life. It's scary, actually. You don't get the sense that the wolf is humanized. No, it's still a scary wolf. So in that instance, but mostly they're using the animals for their own function. They are interested and fascinated by the animals, but it's secondary to their fascination, not fascination, but their pump of themselves. So this is interesting. There's also a note, I didn't know if you realized. So when I wrote this book, actually it was my first ever writing in Arabic. I'm English educated, so I haven't really written in Arabic much. So so this was my first attempt. But when I was writing it, I was very conscious of two very distinct literature genres that I tried to fuse together. Not many people realize this, and I don't know about the attempt. I was reading a lot of leftist, activist, even communist pamphlets from the 19th and early to mid 20th century. So from Frederick Engels to Marx, to Lenin, to Gramsci, all throughout. So this period was a period where I was reading a lot of this literature, and I was fascinated in it and in the activist tone it's taking. And then I was writing this book on pre-Islamic Arabian animals, and I was reading a lot of Abbasid literature at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated in, I wanted my audience, I had a cousin in my mind writing for him, and I know he's never read Arabic literature, and he's never read communist pamphlets. So I wanted to fuse these two genres together. That's why I call it Rasail instead of Fusul, the word chapter. And so it's a fusion that some people find very weird when they read my book, but this is what I had in mind, and I was conscious of having this in mind. And one of my chapters starts with, you know, the communist manifesto starts with this ghost who's haunting Europe, and one of my chapters starts speaking about climate change and that it's haunting the world, and it starts this way. And so I just wanted to give this note about, so it was really an exercise more than a serious academic.
But
it wasn't an academic.
It was really smart to start with animals in poetry and their interpretations. It gives the reader an engagement, an emotional engagement with that creature. And at the end of your risala or message, you say information about the danger that threats those animals. And here you can really influence the reader because we are engaged with that creature. We read about it, we have interpretations about it and how it is related to beauty or whatever concept. And then we read those unfortunate information, which makes us really sad and really responsible. Like it gives the influence of being responsible and active towards those creatures and to preserve them. Because as you said in your book, it's part of our culture, our identity, our voices, our stories. So we really need to pay attention to that matter, to be honest.
So Dalal, we can open the door for questions if any would like to have their say question or even to add anything to our talk.
Normally, before, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, normally before we start the questions, we switch over the recording. But I'd like to say some things while others are also thinking about their questions, and maybe we can. So yes, I do. Thank you both. I love this majlis and everything in it. Including Dalal's original research on the Jawari and on the question of who is free. It's interesting. We just discussed the same thing in last week's lecture in class, exactly the same. And then just one thing, you said that the elites were not reading these and they were not studying it. I think it depends on the elites and maybe the fact that they didn't write about it, it doesn't mean that they were not engaging with this literature. And one fascinating example of that is Ibn Daniel. Do you know it? So Ibn Daniel's shadow plays actually hilarious, and it's incredible that these things, well, it's incredible for us with prejudices, what we get about how Islamic society should have been in the Middle Ages. When it comes to reality, it's something completely different. Right? I put here the translation of these texts, and what is interesting that Ibn Daniel himself, who wrote this heavily pornographic and fun in every sense and blasphemous and everything text, So they were not only performed on the streets, but he had also very good connections to the court. So I think he was at the court. He was on the streets and in the court, and this is very often the case of artists. And yeah, it is fascinating how things, what could be said, what could be read, what was performed. And of course, Zoltán Szombati, whose Majlis is already on the, you can watch the recording. He didn't talk about this, but he wrote a book on the Mujun. So that's one thing. Another is if anyone is interested, I'm sure you studied this, but if anyone is interested in animals and in medieval Arabic, there is Damiri's book, Hayat al-Hayawan, so the life of the animals, yes. And I want to thank you for talking about the deep meaning behind the animals. It's what is interesting in this for me, that how deep this thought is in its roots as well. Because even al-Muqaffa explicitly says it in his introduction, that you have to go behind the animal story, and there is more in it. And then it's an interesting thing how this literature, which is meant to be deep, becomes a children's literature, which doesn't mean it's not still deep, but it doesn't have the recognition what it is, that he says that it is for the philosopher. Actually, that's the first or second text in Arabic which uses the term philosopher, philasuf. And then I wrote a paper on Aesopian language in Ibn al-Muqaffa, referring to Aesop. And Aesopian language is not by chance a term coined by a Russian author, and it is about this double language what intellectuals have to use. So to say something in a way that that you want to communicate something, but you know that it is dangerous to communicate it, so you have to hide it. And then it's not by chance he uses the name of Aesop with his fables. And then, but it's very hard to prove, of course, that there is a hidden meaning of a text. And it was so lovely to hear. It's very rare that the author would give you the key. Okay, I'm using this to avoid censorship, and you did that. You literally said, "I'm using this to avoid censorship," which is quite unique. Normally, people cannot denounce themselves doing this. Less joyful and delightful is that I had to finish my paper with a note when I was about to conclude it, that a tale by Aesop was used in Hong Kong by some, I think, young teachers. They made some animation of it or something like this, and they ended up in jail. So Aesopian language is not always good enough to protect you against the authorities. In this case, the Chinese government felt that they were too freedom prone. So yes, people wanting too much freedom end up often in prison. So yes, that this phenomenon, and the point is that this phenomenon which is not realized by many Western academics, is not just the majority of the past was like this, but even the majority of the present is like this. But we very often use Aesopian language in most of the world in some way. So thank you for pointing this out. Do you Yeah, well, to add one question, that how daring was for you to write not just about this, but from the Jariyas, the Jabari, the slave girls, openly sexual poetry, in the first place as a Kuwaiti MA student. Yeah, and then I will keep running the recording, and then you give your reply. I will switch it off for further questions.
It's really an interesting question, which is funny when I reply to. However, I would like to first comment on the points you mentioned about the elites and who decide what is. There is a fascinating book by Sinan Antoun called the Poetic of the Obscene. And in this book, he studies Ibn Hajjaj, who was literally not an eloquent, polite poet. He was really vulgar when it comes to poetry. He also, he wrote negative poems about al-Mutanabbi. He dared to do so to al-Mutanabbi. And in this book, he gives a very fascinating discussion about classism when it comes to topics and literature as well. And he says, like, these types of literature, erotics or sexualities, academics see themselves above that. They tend to study, classy literature, and sometimes they don't classify these types of poems as literature, because they think and classify that literature should be this and that. And therefore, that's why he talk about Ibn al-Hajjaj as a phenomena that that exposes a lot of things, classism, academia, the topics of professors, and what captures them when it comes to talk about these poems and these genres. Also, you mentioned censorship. Why I said it? Because the play tackles the voice of a young female, it's actually a coming of age story. And my main character is a young girl. And when you see people and how do they react towards direct messages when it comes to young women, the ghost of feminism, as we can say, and how we are living in an age which is unfortunately where extremist religious people are among us, and they have authority whether we like it or not. Especially here in Kuwait, they have representatives in the parliament. So whenever people here got in prison because of a tweet on Twitter, that is purely innocent, but their ability to interpret people intentions is fascinating. And we had a lot of cases where people are in jail because of what they wrote. Especially when a young woman, a poet, people would see me reckless or like engaging to be rebellious, and I target young adults and young women, so it might put me in a very critical situation. So in order to avoid that, in order to go through that, I chose to choose this genre of animals. And moreover, when it comes to censorship, I believe that magical realism is the solution. And it has a lot of deep meanings. Like everyone was fascinated by Game of Thrones. It was the most watched TV series in the history. And Game of Thrones is a fantasy, an imagination about kingdoms. And it was really fascinating how those kind of stories can carry a lot of deep meanings about power, about gender roles, about creatures, and also the dragons. What can you interpretate the dragons? Why are there three dragons, not two or one? Could they represent the three, dragons in our world, China, Russia, and the USA? It has a lot of interpretation. However, you can run with it, and you can have, a justification. You can say that this is the viewer justification. And for me, tackling a coming of age story, talking about politics, talking about corruption in politics. If you read the story, you can get it, how two different opposites have secret relationships to control their their heads. Those meanings are political, and I know if I say them loud and clear and very direct, I can get into trouble. So the safe choice to do is to hide behind the animal mask in order to say whatever you want to say, especially with poetry as well, because I know poets, they know that we are a bit we deceive people because we get them into being emotional. We can make you feel affected. You can be against an idea, but an emotional poem can make you really rethink about it. So we use those kind of tools to to reduce the aggressive tone if someone is trying to come against us. So I think mainly people sometimes criticize censorship. However, I see it a big opportunity to open widely your imagination and go through beyond realism to deliver such messages. About my master thesis, I remember something really funny when I told my father that I am going to tackle erotic poetry of Jawari and the Landai, and I really believe that I'm a very lucky girl because I have an open-minded father. However, he told me something: whoever asks you about your master thesis, just don't say just don't tell them about it. Just don't tell them about it and just go forward. Because people will not really understand, especially from our culture. And however, if the topic is discussed academically, I don't think there are anything possible, which is, and the ironic thing about that we have a lot of books, ancient books about sexuality. A more ironic fact that the authors of these books are fuqaha, are religious people. For example, like you have Kitab al-Zuhra is written by a religious people. Kitab also Fiqh al-Bah لعودة الشيب إلى الصباه was also a religious person who wrote that. And it's all about, Fiqh al-Bah is actually the Kama Sutra in Arabic, in that really definition. And it is really fascinating that our ancient history dealt with the sexuality in a more open way than we deal with it nowadays. And it has nothing to do with Islam or what is forbidden or not, because those people who wrote those books were religious people. However, I think it's more of a cultural stigmas that want to control about that. And because in this, and I talk about this in my thesis, especially when I discuss the ability to talk about these topics when it comes to ar, shame, sharaf, honor, and those terms that are social norms forced on young girls to prevent them from talking openly about sexuality.
So there is also something very interesting here with the classicization of culture, when it becomes a point of reference for people with any sort of rigidity. And that's what you say is very interesting, because this classicization then has something to do with society being the rigidity of society, which I never thought of. That so it again, coming back to the Kalila Wadimna, on which we had three sessions earlier in the Majlis series, what you can watch. So it is interesting how it becomes a classic, and it's not just becomes children's literature, but it is boundarized more and more. So so the original one has very sexual stories, which then are expurged, and extremely funny stories as well, which are then expurged from the text. And this classicization leads then the text which had the unfortune of becoming a great classic, then it's completely diluted and made sterile. And then at the end, okay, it loses its interest, and it's something to refer to, but not to read. Why? Just two more. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, come on. And you know what's funny? There's a book called The Secondary Sex. The introduction of that book is really, it's harsh but true. They said that the medieval ages in Europe had a lot of doctors, poets who were female. However, history, mostly people who recorded history, were interested in sexual scandals of women, and that's what they documented. And unfortunately, you cannot, in the age of al-Mutanabbi, in the age of Abu Firas al-Hamadani, it is really hard to believe that this culture didn't produce a female poetess. However, you will find a book called Al-Ima al-Shawa'ir of al-Asbahani, where he lists the sexual poems of al-Jawari. And if a Jariya can produce such literature, she is also capable of writing other topics and other genres. However, people were not interested in, and there is a rule that says that النساء لا يصلحن إلا للبكاء والرثاء. Women are only good for crying and elegies. Therefore, they, just, canceled anything produced by women. Also, al-Farāsha has a famous sentence when he said, إذا صاحت الدجاجة صياح الديك فلتذبح. If a chicken sounded like a rooster, you should kill it. Like that poetry doesn't really, collaborate with the nature
if
of
a hen.
Yes. And also we have a book by Ibn Salam al-Jumahi called طبقات فحول الشعراء, and he related فحولة with شعراء, which is like a very masculine attribute. Therefore they tried to make poetry exclusively limited to men, rather than to be for women. And there are what we can call them yatima, and only one poem for a poet, which is there's a famous poem by Maysun al-Bahdaliya. She was the wife of Muawiyah, where she wrote a poem about preferring to live in a tent rather than to live in a castle, because she was took from her home country to live in Damascus. And لبيت تعصف الأرياح فيه. It's a very famous poem. Therefore, if Maysun can say that kind of poetry, it means there were poetry. However, it was censored, and the documentation department was controlled by men, unfortunately. That's why we have really poor resources when it comes to the poetry of al-Jawari.
As you mentioned, rooster and hen, I also wanted to refer to another brilliant PhD students of ours from Kuwait, whose work I'm reading right now, and he quotes Bashar ibn Burd on a poem. So he's criticized by a critique. Why he uses sometimes such low registers of language, and well, originally this came to my mind when you were discussing the idea of how to actually approach your possible readers, and then he said, yeah, well, for my I composed that poem on the hen and the rooster of my neighbor, and she the effect of my poem on her is the same that a poem of Imrul Qais on you. And this is very interesting, a very interesting literary theory behind, an unsaid theory that the good literature is what serves, what has its effect, the desired effect on the desired audience. So it's, yeah, and again, here again, the poet is much more open-minded than the critic. Maybe that's why the critic is a critic and rather than a poet. So yeah, well, yeah, and just on the poet, one more thing, this famous line by Abu Nuwas when he is taken into account for the things he wrote, and then he has the courage of referring to the Quran and says, but don't you know that the poets are not doing what they write, what they say? It is just sheer brilliance. Thank you, Dalal. Thank you, Ismail. I will close the recording, but you are still here. We are well over time, but if we have, if anyone else still has questions, please do it. Please ask them. And I apologize for taking so much of the audience's time.